March. That was my last day. Nobody's told me I did something right since. Not in those exact words. Not close. 4 months now, and I've caught myself doing the math more than once, which is its own strange thing to admit out loud. Here's what I mean, so you don't think I've lost my mind over a compliment. For almost 20 years, there was a man named Marcus who ran the department 2 doors down from mine. Not my direct boss for most of that time, more like the guy whose opinion actually mattered to the people whose opinions mattered. And Marcus had this habit. Nothing formal about it, no performance review, no memo, nothing that would ever show up on paper. He'd finish reading something you sent him, a report, a proposal, whatever it was that week. And sometime later, usually a day or two, he'd walk by your desk on his way to somewhere else, slow down just enough, and say 2 words. Great job. That's it. Not even a full sentence most of the time. Sometimes just those 2 words and a nod, already walking again before you'd finished saying thanks. I want to be honest with you about something. For most of those 20 years, I didn't think about it much at all. It was just Tuesday. It was just Marcus doing his Marcus thing on his way to a meeting. I didn't write it down. I didn't tell my wife about it at dinner. It was so small and so regular that it never once occurred to me it was doing anything. That's the part nobody warns you about. The smallest things are the ones you don't notice holding you up, right until the day they're not there anymore, and you feel the whole structure shift underneath you. So here's where I actually am now, 4 months out. And somewhere in there, without deciding to, I started keeping track. Not on a calendar, just in my head, the way you'd notice if it hadn't rained in a while. It's been 4 months since anyone told me I did something right. And I know exactly how that sounds. I do. A grown man, 30-some years into a career, keeping a private tally of how long it's been since somebody said 2 words to him. If you'd told me this 5 years ago, I probably would have laughed a little too. But here I am, and it's true. So I'm just going to say it plainly instead of pretending it isn't. Let's talk about why this particular thing, out of everything retirement takes away, is the one that actually stings the most some weeks. Because it's not the biggest loss, not even close. I got a nice send-off. I got a handshake from the regional VP and a card everybody signed, and a decent pension that means I'm not lying awake worrying about money. Those are the big, visible things, and I want to be clear. I'm grateful for every one of them. This isn't about that. This is about something smaller and, it turns out, a lot more load-bearing than I ever gave it credit for. Because a promotion happens once every few years if you're lucky. A bonus arrives once a year, wrapped in spreadsheets and percentages that have more to do with the company's numbers than your actual Tuesday. Those things are real, but they're rare, and rare things don't structure your week. What structured my week, for the better part of 2 decades, was the possibility that on any given Thursday or Friday, Marcus might walk by and say those 2 words. That was frequent. That was constant, in the background, the way you don't notice your own heartbeat until somebody asks you to listen for it. So when people ask what I miss about work, and they usually guess the big stuff, the title, the meetings, the sense of purpose, I never quite know how to explain that what I actually miss is smaller and stranger than any of that. I miss a man in a gray sport coat, slowing down for 4 seconds outside my cubicle. Here's the deeper thing I've been turning over, and I think it's the actual answer, not just the feeling. Those 2 words were never really about the report or the project or whatever I'd just finished. If they were only about the work itself, a system could replace them. A dashboard could tell me my numbers were good. An email could say, "Well done," automated and generic, and sent to 40 people at once. But that's not what those words were doing, and I think some part of me always knew it, even when I wasn't paying attention. What those words actually were was proof that one specific person had looked at one specific thing I did and thought about me specifically long enough to walk over and say something about it. Not the department, not the team, me. That's a completely different thing than recognition in the abstract, and it's the thing retirement doesn't have a version of, because retirement doesn't come with a Marcus. There's no one whose job includes noticing your Tuesday. So here's the honest question I've had to sit with. If I never really cared about the compliment itself, if what I actually wanted was to matter to one particular person enough that they'd bother to say so, does that make me needy? Is that a small, embarrassing thing to want at my age, after everything I've already accomplished? No, and I want to say that as plainly as I can, because I spent a few weeks quietly ashamed of missing something so small before I worked out why I shouldn't be. Wanting to be seen by someone specific isn't neediness. It's one of the oldest, most basic parts of being a person there is. Children want it from their parents. Employees want it from the people whose judgment they respect. It doesn't stop being real just because you're 63 and technically don't have a boss anymore. The want doesn't retire. Only the person who used to answer it does. And here's the part that actually reframes the whole thing for me once I sat with it long enough. The ache itself is the proof. If those two words hadn't mattered, I wouldn't be able to tell you it's been 4 months. I wouldn't have noticed at all. The fact that I can count it precisely, down to the week, means those words were doing real work in my life the entire time I thought they were nothing. You don't grieve a hole that was never actually load-bearing. This one was. So the feeling isn't a flaw to fix, it's information. It's telling you something true about what you actually needed, that you never had to think about while it was still there. Which brings me to the part I've actually been trying to do something about, instead of just missing. Because understanding why it hurts doesn't fill the hole by itself. I know that. You can explain a feeling perfectly and still feel it exactly the same the next morning. So here's what I've actually started doing, for what it's worth. I stopped waiting for someone to hand this back to me, because nobody's coming to do that. There's no new Marcus assigned to retirees. Instead, I started looking for the same shape of thing, small, specific, aimed at one person, in the places I actually still am. My granddaughter finished building something out of those little magnetic blocks last month, spent almost an hour on it, dead serious the whole time. And I did the thing. I got down at her level, looked at the actual thing she'd built, not just at her, and told her specifically what part of it I thought was clever. Not, "Good job, sweetie," on the way past. The real version. Slowed down. Meant it. And here's what I didn't expect. It felt almost as good giving it as I remember receiving it. Maybe better, honestly, because I got to choose exactly who received it and exactly why, instead of just hoping someone noticed me. I've started doing it with my neighbor too, when he's out working on something in his garage that clearly took him a while. Not empty praise. Specific. "I saw what you did there. That's good work." Small, on purpose, aimed at one person. And the other thing, the harder thing, is learning to say it to myself when I've actually earned it, since nobody else has that job on their calendar anymore. That felt strange the first few times, almost silly, telling myself I did something right when there was no one else in the room to hear it. But it turns out the words don't lose all their power just because you're the one saying them. Some of it holds. Not all of what Marcus gave me, I won't pretend otherwise, but some. So I think about March differently now than I did back in July, sitting with this. March isn't just the month everything stopped. It's also, if I'm being honest, close to the last time I did this whole thing without noticing I was doing it at all. Waiting for it, counting on it without counting it. These days, I try to remember that the count doesn't have to run in only one direction. It doesn't only have to be how long since somebody told me. It can also be how long since I told somebody else. March. That was my last day. Nobody's told me I did something right since. But last Tuesday, I told my granddaughter she'd built something clever, and I meant every word of it, and she looked up at me like it was the best thing anyone had said to her all week. Maybe it was. You don't have to wait for someone to notice you before you start noticing somebody else. Turns out, that's not a consolation prize either. It's just where the words go now.